As you settle into comfort this evening, preparing your mind for peaceful slumber, let us journey back through the mists of time to the ancient lands of Persia, where mountains kiss the sky and vast plateaus stretch beyond the horizon. The story of the Persian Empire begins not in grand palaces or mighty capitals, but in the whispered legends of nomadic tribes wandering the harsh yet beautiful landscapes of what we now call Iran. Close your eyes and imagine the Zagros Mountains, their peaks crowned with snow, their valleys hiding secrets that would one day reshape the ancient world. Here, among these rugged heights, lived tribes of horsemen and shepherds who called themselves the Parsa, the people who would give their name to Persia itself. These early Iranians spoke of a time when their ancestors had journeyed from distant northern lands, following the path of the sun, guided by dreams and prophecies toward a destiny they could scarcely imagine. The ancient texts speak of a divine prophecy told and retold around flickering fires beneath star-filled skies. It was said that from among the Persian tribes would arise a king unlike any who had come before, one who would unite the scattered peoples and create an empire stretching from sunrise to sunset. This prophecy lived in the hearts of the people through generations of hardship and struggle, a promise of future greatness that sustained them through the darkest times. Picture the world as it existed in the 7th century before our common era. The mighty Assyrian Empire had fallen, its great cities reduced to ruins. Babylon still stood proud but weakened, its glory fading like the last light of dusk. The Medes, cousins to the Persians, had established their own kingdom in the northern regions of Iran, ruling over their Persian kinsmen with a hand that grew heavier with each passing year. It was into this world of shifting powers and ancient prophecies that a child was born who would change everything. His name was Kurush, whom history remembers as Cyrus. The stories of his birth blend history with legend in ways that make it impossible to separate truth from myth. Yet perhaps that is as it should be, for the greatest figures of history often transcend mere facts to become something more profound. According to the legends preserved by Herodotus and other ancient chroniclers, Cyrus's grandfather was Astyages, the king of the Medes. This powerful ruler had been troubled by disturbing dreams. In one vision, he saw his daughter Mandane giving birth to a vine that grew to cover all of Asia. His court magicians, the wise men known as Magi, interpreted this to mean that Mandane's child would one day overthrow him and rule in his place. Fear gripped Astyages' heart with icy fingers. When Mandane gave birth to a son, the king commanded his most trusted general, Harpagus, to take the infant into the mountains and leave him to die. But fate, as it often does in the great stories of history, had other plans. Harpagus, moved by conscience or perhaps by divine intervention, could not bring himself to murder the innocent child. Instead, he gave the baby to a shepherd named Mithridates, instructing him to abandon the infant on the mountainside. Imagine that shepherd holding the royal infant, feeling the weight of destiny in his arms. Mithridates' wife had recently given birth to a stillborn child, and when she saw the healthy baby boy, she begged her husband to keep him. They would raise him as their own, she said, and tell the authorities that they had exposed their own dead child instead. And so Cyrus grew up among the shepherds and goatherds of the mountains, unaware of his royal blood, learning the ways of the common people. He tended flocks beneath the vast Persian sky, developed the strength and endurance that mountain life demands, and absorbed the stories, values, and dreams of his adopted community. The ancient sources tell us that even as a child, Cyrus displayed remarkable leadership qualities, organizing the other children in games where he invariably played the king. It was during one such game that fate intervened once more. The children of the village had chosen Cyrus as their king in a mock court, and when the son of a nobleman refused to obey his commands, young Cyrus had him beaten as punishment. The nobleman, outraged that a shepherd's boy would dare strike his son, brought the matter before King Astyages himself. When the king questioned the boy, he was struck by Cyrus's proud bearing and fearless responses. Something in the child's face, perhaps, or in his manner of speaking, stirred recognition. Astyages summoned the shepherd Mithridates, and under intense questioning, the truth finally emerged. The boy he had ordered killed 10 years earlier stood before him, alive and defiant. One might expect that Astyages would immediately order the boy's death, but the human heart is complex, filled with contradictions that logic cannot explain. Perhaps the king was moved by his grandson's courage, or perhaps he believed that fate could not be denied. He allowed Cyrus to live, even bringing him to court to be educated as befitted his true station. As for Harpagus, who had disobeyed his orders, Astyages devised a punishment so cruel that it would echo through history as a warning about the terrible price of deception and the dark depths of royal vengeance. Consider how Cyrus spent his youth straddling two worlds. By day, he learned the arts of nobility, reading and writing in multiple scripts, the protocols of court, the strategies of governance and war. By night, perhaps, he remembered his years among the shepherds, the simple truths and honest values he had absorbed in those mountains. This dual education would serve him well in the years to come, making him a king who could speak to both noble and commoner with equal ease. The years passed like pages turning in an ancient book. Cyrus grew into manhood, tall and strong, with eyes that seemed to see beyond the present into possibilities others could not imagine. He returned to Persia, to his father Cambyses, who ruled there as a vassal of the Medes. The Persian tribes at this time were divided into several clans: the Pasargadae, to which Cyrus belonged, the Marathi, the Maspi, and others. Each had their own traditions and territories, united only by language, customs, and their subordination to Median rule. But change was stirring in the wind that blew across the Persian highlands. The Median Empire, though vast, was showing signs of strain. Astyages had grown paranoid and cruel with age, alienating his nobles with arbitrary executions and excessive demands. The army, once fiercely loyal, began to murmur with discontent. The tribute demanded from vassal peoples grew ever more burdensome, breeding resentment that needed only a spark to ignite into rebellion. That spark would be Cyrus. Imagine him in those crucial years, moving among the Persian tribes, speaking in the gathering places, sharing his vision of a different future. He did not speak of mere rebellion or simple freedom from Median rule. Instead, he painted a picture of something unprecedented, a Persian empire that would surpass anything the world had yet seen, ruled not through fear and oppression, but through justice and tolerance. The ancient sources tell us that Cyrus possessed a remarkable ability to inspire loyalty. He remembered names and faces, inquired after the welfare of common soldiers' families, shared hardships without complaint. Where other princes might demand obedience, Cyrus earned devotion. Where others ruled through fear, he led through example. These qualities, rare in any age, would prove to be the foundation stones upon which the greatest empire of the ancient world would be built. Rest now as we prepare to follow Cyrus on his journey from rebel to ruler, from the particular to the universal, from a small Persian principality to an empire that would stretch across 3 continents and touch the lives of millions. The shepherd boy, who had played at being king, was about to claim a real throne, and in doing so would set in motion events that would echo through the corridors of time for millennia to come. The story of Persia has only just begun. Let your mind wander back to that pivotal moment when Cyrus stood ready to challenge the established order of the ancient world. The year was approximately 553 BCE, and the Persian tribes had gathered in response to his call. Picture the scene. Thousands of warriors assembled on the plains near Pasargadae, their bronze weapons glinting in the morning sun, their hearts filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. Cyrus understood that unity was essential for success. The Persian tribes, though related by blood and custom, had often quarreled among themselves, their energies dissipated in petty conflicts. Standing before the assembled multitude, Cyrus performed a masterful piece of political theatre that would be remembered for generations. He ordered all the men to spend a day clearing a field full of thorns and thistles, back-breaking work that left them exhausted and dispirited. The next day, he commanded them to bathe and dress in their finest clothes, then invited them to a magnificent feast with the best food and wine Persia could offer. As they reclined on soft cushions, enjoying the abundance before them, Cyrus asked which day they preferred. The answer was unanimous. The day of feasting, of course. "Follow me against the Medes," Cyrus declared, "and every day shall be like this second day. Remain subjects, and every day will be like the first." Imagine the effect of these words rippling through the crowd like wind across a field of grain. Here was not just a promise of freedom, but a vision of prosperity and dignity. The Persian tribes united behind Cyrus with an enthusiasm that surprised even their enemies. The shepherd boy who had become a prince now transformed into a revolutionary leader. Astyages, learning of his grandson's rebellion, responded with predictable fury. He assembled the full might of the Median army and marched against the Persians. The two forces met on the borders between Media and Persia, in a battle that would determine the fate of nations. But Cyrus had been busy with more than military preparations. Through secret messengers, he had been in contact with Median nobles dissatisfied with Astyages' rule, particularly Harpagus, who had never forgotten the terrible revenge the king had taken upon him years before. When the battle lines formed and the war cries rang out, something unexpected occurred. Large portions of the Median army, led by their own generals, switched sides in the midst of combat. Astyages watched in horror as his mighty force crumbled from within. The very general he had sent to crush the rebellion, Harpagus, now fought alongside Cyrus. The battle became a rout, and Astyages himself was captured, though Cyrus, displaying the mercy that would become his hallmark, spared his grandfather's life. With the fall of Astyages, Cyrus found himself master not just of Persia, but of the entire Median Empire. Yet instead of destroying Median culture or institutions, he chose a different path. He declared himself heir to both Persian and Median traditions, taking the title King of the Persians and the Medes. The Median capital of Ecbatana became one of his royal cities. Median nobles retained their positions, and Median customs were respected alongside Persian ones. This policy of inclusion rather than domination would become the defining characteristic of Persian imperial rule. Where other conquerors sought to impose uniformity, Cyrus celebrated diversity. Where others destroyed, he preserved. This was not mere pragmatism, though it certainly made governing easier. It reflected a profound understanding that an empire built on respect and tolerance would prove far more durable than one maintained through fear alone. Picture Cyrus in these early years of his reign transforming from warrior to statesman. He established a new capital at Pasargadae, a city that embodied his vision of Persian identity. Unlike the massive, imposing capitals of Assyria or Babylon, Pasargadae was built in harmony with its natural surroundings. Gardens filled with trees from every corner of the empire surrounded elegant pavilions. Water channels created soothing sounds that promoted contemplation and peace. The design of Pasargadae revealed much about Persian values. Where other ancient kings built monuments to intimidate, Cyrus created spaces that inspired. The famous inscription found there reads simply, "I am Cyrus, the king, the Achaemenid." No boastful titles, no claims of divine status, just a straightforward declaration of identity. This humility, remarkable in an age of god-kings and inflated rhetoric, would characterize the best of Persian rulership. But Cyrus could not rest content with his initial victories. To the west lay the fabulously wealthy kingdom of Lydia, ruled by Croesus, whose riches had become proverbial. Croesus, alarmed by the sudden rise of Persian power, consulted the famous oracle at Delphi. The oracle's response was typically ambiguous. "If you cross the Halys River, you will destroy a great empire." Interpreting this as favorable, Croesus invaded Persian territory. Cyrus met the Lydian invasion with characteristic energy, fighting an inconclusive battle that sent Croesus retreating to his capital of Sardis for the winter. Most ancient generals would have done the same, waiting for spring to resume campaigning. But Cyrus understood that boldness could overcome material disadvantage. He pursued Croesus through the harsh Anatolian winter, appearing before the walls of Sardis when least expected. The siege of Sardis demonstrated Persian adaptability and innovation. The city's acropolis seemed impregnable, perched on steep cliffs. But a Persian soldier observed a defender climbing down a supposedly impossible section of cliff to retrieve a fallen helmet. That night, a picked force of Persians scaled the cliff face and opened the gates from within. Sardis fell, and with it, the Lydian Empire. Once again, Cyrus showed mercy to a defeated king, sparing Croesus, and, according to some accounts, making him an honored advisor. The fall of Lydia brought Cyrus into contact with the Greek cities of the Ionian coast. These sophisticated urban centers, with their traditions of democracy and philosophy, presented a new challenge. Some submitted willingly, impressed by Cyrus's reputation for tolerance. Others resisted, leading to sieges and negotiations that would establish patterns of Greek-Persian interaction lasting centuries. Cyrus appointed local rulers where possible, required reasonable tribute, and allowed the Greeks to maintain their customs and religions. Consider how Cyrus was creating something unprecedented in human history. Previous empires had been instruments of exploitation designed to funnel wealth and resources to a dominant ethnic group. The Persian Empire, as Cyrus conceived it, was different. It was a cosmopolitan enterprise where Persians, Medes, Lydians, Greeks, and others could all find a place. This was not modern multiculturalism. Persians certainly enjoyed privileges, but it represented a revolutionary advance in political thinking. The eastern frontiers also demanded attention. Beyond the Iranian plateau lay the vast spaces of Central Asia, home to nomadic peoples who could threaten settled civilizations with their swift cavalry raids. Cyrus led campaigns into these regions, establishing fortified cities and making alliances with local rulers. The details of these eastern wars are lost in the mists of time, but their success expanded Persian rule to the borders of India and the steppes of Inner Asia. It was in Babylon, however, that Cyrus would perform his most celebrated act of kingship. The great city on the Euphrates had declined under the erratic rule of Nabonidus, who had alienated the powerful priesthood of Marduk. When Cyrus approached with his army in 539 BCE, the gates of Babylon opened without a fight. The Persian king entered not as a conqueror, but as a liberator, participating in the traditional ceremonies and presenting himself as the chosen of Marduk. In Babylon, Cyrus issued what some consider the world's first declaration of human rights. Inscribed on a clay cylinder, his proclamation announced religious freedom for all peoples, the right of deportees to return to their homelands, and the prohibition of forced labor. The Jewish exiles in Babylon, carried there by Nebuchadnezzar decades earlier, were allowed to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple, an act of kindness that earned Cyrus praise in the Hebrew Bible as a Messiah, an anointed one of God. Imagine the impact of these policies rippling across the ancient world like waves from a stone dropped in still water. People who had known only oppression suddenly found themselves treated with dignity. Languages that conquering armies had tried to suppress were now heard in the councils of power. Gods and goddesses who had been forbidden were once again openly worshipped. This was the Persian peace, the Pax Persica, that Cyrus established, not through crushing uniformity, but through celebrating diversity. The empire Cyrus built in his 30-year reign stretched from the Aegean Sea to the Indus River, from the Caucasus Mountains to the borders of Egypt. It encompassed dozens of different peoples, languages, and cultures, all held together not primarily by force, but by a vision of mutual benefit and respect. This was Cyrus's greatest innovation. The idea that an empire could be a partnership rather than a prison. Rest peacefully, knowing that from these foundations would rise an even greater structure as Cyrus's successors built upon his vision to create the largest empire the world had yet seen. Let your mind drift forward to the years following Cyrus's death in 530 BCE. The great king had fallen in battle against the Massagetæ, a nomadic people of the Central Asian steppes, led by their fierce queen, Tomyris. According to legend, she had his head placed in a wineskin filled with blood, declaring, "I warned you that I would quench your thirst for blood." Even in death, Cyrus had become the stuff of legend, a figure whose life blurred the boundaries between history and myth. The empire passed to his son Cambyses II, a man of considerable ability but lacking his father's charismatic touch. Picture this new king facing the challenge that confronts all heirs to greatness: how to emerge from a mighty shadow while maintaining what has been built. Cambyses chose the path of continued expansion, setting his sights on the one great power that had eluded his father, Egypt. The invasion of Egypt in 525 BCE demonstrated Persian military sophistication. Cambyses spent months in preparation, negotiating with Bedouin tribes for safe passage through the Sinai Desert, arranging for water supplies, and building a fleet to support his land forces. When he met Pharaoh Psamtik III at the Battle of Pelusium, Cambyses employed psychological warfare, allegedly driving sacred animals before his troops. Knowing the Egyptians would hesitate to shoot arrows that might strike cats or ibises, Egypt fell to the Persians, adding the ancient land of the pharaohs to an already vast empire. Cambyses took the traditional pharaonic titles and participated in Egyptian religious ceremonies, continuing his father's policy of cultural accommodation. Yet, something in Cambyses' character differed from Cyrus. Where the father had been naturally gracious, the son seemed to force himself into tolerance. Stories, perhaps exaggerated by hostile sources, speak of occasional outbursts of cruelty and impiety that alienated his subjects. In 522 BCE, while Cambyses was still in Egypt, word came of a rebellion in the Persian heartland. A man claiming to be Bardia, Cambyses' brother, had seized the throne. Cambyses began the journey home, but died under mysterious circumstances. Accident, illness, suicide, or assassination, we cannot know. The empire teetered on the edge of chaos. Into this crisis stepped one of history's most remarkable rulers, Darius, a distant relative of the royal family who held the position of spear-bearer to Cambyses. Along with 6 other Persian nobles, Darius orchestrated a coup against the man they claimed was not Bardia, but an impostor, a Median priest named Gaumata, who bore a striking resemblance to the murdered prince. Whether this story was true or merely propaganda to justify Darius's seizure of power remains debated by scholars to this day. What cannot be debated is Darius's extraordinary ability as an administrator and empire builder. Where Cyrus had been the visionary founder and Cambyses the determined expander, Darius would be the great organizer who transformed a collection of conquered territories into a functioning world state. The energy and intelligence Darius brought to this monumental task was remarkable. The empire Darius inherited was in rebellion. Babylon, Media, Armenia, and other regions had risen in revolt, each proclaiming local leaders as kings. In a whirlwind campaign lasting 2 years, Darius and his generals suppressed these rebellions one by one. He commemorated his victories in the famous Behistun inscription, carved high on a cliff face in 3 languages, telling his version of events for all posterity to read. But Darius understood that military victory alone could not hold an empire together. He embarked on a comprehensive reorganization that would become the model for large-scale governance for centuries to come. The empire was divided into 20 satrapies, or provinces, each governed by a satrap appointed by the king. These satraps had significant autonomy in local affairs, but were checked by royal secretaries and military commanders who reported directly to the king. Each satrapy was assessed for its resources and required to pay a fixed annual tribute in gold or silver. Darius standardized weights and measures across the empire and introduced a new gold coin, the daric, which became one of the ancient world's most trusted currencies. This economic integration meant that a merchant could travel from Sardis to Susa using the same coins and encountering the same commercial standards. Perhaps Darius's most famous innovation was the Royal Road, a highway stretching over 1,600 miles from Susa in Persia to Sardis in Anatolia. Rest stations every 15 miles or so provided fresh horses for royal messengers who could cover the entire distance in just 7 days, a speed that would not be surpassed until the advent of the telegraph. Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor darkness of night prevents these couriers from completing their designated stages with utmost speed, wrote Herodotus, words later adapted as the motto of the United States Postal Service. Visualize the Persian court at its height. Darius established 4 capital cities, moving between them with the seasons. Susa served as the administrative center, Persepolis as the ceremonial capital, Ecbatana as the summer retreat, and Babylon as a crucial commercial hub. Each capital reflected the empire's cosmopolitan nature, with architecture and art that blended Persian, Median, Babylonian, Egyptian, and Greek influences. Persepolis, begun by Darius and continued by his successors, stands as the supreme achievement of Persian architecture. Picture its grand staircases, wide enough for 10 horsemen to ride abreast, its forest of columns topped with elaborate capitals, its walls covered with reliefs showing delegations from every corner of the empire, bringing tribute to the King of Kings. Yet these images convey not oppression, but order, not fear, but respect. The figures are dignified, their cultural distinctiveness carefully preserved in stone. The religious and philosophical dimensions of Persian rule deepened under Darius. While Cyrus had practiced tolerance, Darius gave it theological grounding in Zoroastrianism, the ancient Iranian faith centered on the prophet Zoroaster's teachings. This religion, with its emphasis on the cosmic struggle between truth and falsehood, light and darkness, provided an ethical framework for imperial rule. The king was the earthly champion of Ahura Mazda, the wise lord, charged with promoting truth and justice throughout the world. Consider how this religious vision influenced Persian governance. The emphasis on truth meant that lying was considered the worst sin. Persian education stressed honesty alongside horsemanship and archery. The empire's legal system, while allowing local customs to continue, insisted on fair procedures and careful investigation of evidence. Judges who accepted bribes faced severe punishment, including a grotesque fate where their flayed skin would be used to upholster the judgment seat of their successor. Darius's reign also saw the first major clash between Persia and the Greek city-states that would define much of ancient history. The Ionian Greek cities under Persian rule revolted in 499 BCE, supported by Athens and Eretria. Darius suppressed the revolt, but determined to punish the mainland Greeks for their interference. The resulting invasion ended in the shocking Persian defeat at Marathon in 490 BCE, where Athenian hoplites proved that the mighty Persian army was not invincible. The succession of Darius by his son Xerxes in 486 BCE brought a new personality to the throne. Where Darius had been calculating and methodical, Xerxes was passionate and grandiose. He inherited his father's plan to invade Greece and expanded it into the largest military expedition the ancient world had ever seen. Ancient sources, doubtless exaggerating, speak of an army of over 1 million men and a navy of 1,200 ships. The invasion of 480 BCE has passed into legend through the accounts of Herodotus and later historians. Picture the great bridges of boats Xerxes built across the Hellespont, the canal he dug through the Mount Athos Peninsula, the vast supply depots established along the route. When a storm destroyed the first bridges, Xerxes allegedly had the sea whipped for its insolence, a story that Greeks told to illustrate Persian hubris, but which might also reflect a ritual attempt to placate hostile natural forces. The battles of Thermopylae and Salamis have become touchstones of Western civilization, but from the Persian perspective, they were setbacks in a larger strategic picture. Yes, the Spartans and their allies made a heroic stand at the pass, and yes, the Greek fleet won a stunning victory in the Straits of Salamis. But Xerxes still captured and burned Athens, achieving his primary objective of punishing the city that had aided the Ionian revolt. The subsequent Persian withdrawal had as much to do with logistics and grand strategy as with Greek military prowess. Remember that the Persian Empire at its height was not defined by its conflicts with Greece, despite the emphasis placed on these wars by European historians. The vast majority of the empire's subjects never saw a Greek hoplite or worried about Athenian democracy. They lived their lives under what was, by ancient standards, remarkably benign rule, practicing their religions, speaking their languages, and conducting their business within a stable, prosperous, and well-administered state. This golden age of Persian power created conditions for unprecedented cultural exchange. Ideas, technologies, and artistic styles moved along Persian roads and sea routes. Astronomical knowledge from Babylon influenced Greek thinkers. Indian mathematics traveled westward. Egyptian medicine spread throughout the empire. This was the first great age of globalization, made possible by Persian administrative genius and cultural tolerance. The reigns of Darius and Xerxes marked the apex of Achaemenid power. The empire stretched from the Indus to the Danube, from the Aral Sea to the first cataract of the Nile. Within its borders lived perhaps 50 million people, nearly half the world's population at that time. It was an achievement that would not be equaled until Rome reached its greatest extent centuries later. But like all human creations, it contained the seeds of its own eventual transformation. Allow your mind to drift gently forward through the corridors of time as we enter the period following Xerxes's reign. The King of Kings was assassinated in 465 BCE in a palace conspiracy, a violent end that would establish an unfortunate pattern for several of his successors. Consider how empires, like individuals, experience cycles of vigor and weariness, expansion and contraction, confidence and doubt. Artaxerxes I, who succeeded his father after considerable palace intrigue, inherited an empire that remained vast and powerful, but faced new challenges. The Western satrapies, particularly Egypt, grew restless under Persian rule. The Greek city-states, emboldened by their victories, supported rebellions wherever possible. Most significantly, the empire's very success had created internal tensions as satraps grew wealthy and autonomous, sometimes pursuing policies that conflicted with imperial interests. Picture the delicate balance Artaxerxes had to maintain. Unlike his predecessors who could focus on expansion and consolidation, he faced the more complex task of managing decline while projecting strength. Egypt revolted with Athenian support, and though the rebellion was eventually suppressed, it required years of costly campaigning. The Peace of Callias, signed with Athens around 449 BCE, effectively acknowledged Persian withdrawal from the Aegean, though both sides claimed victory. Yet this period of apparent decline also witnessed remarkable cultural flowering. Imagine the great palace complexes where Persian, Greek, Egyptian, and Babylonian artists worked side by side. The Persepolis reliefs from this era show increasing sophistication, with figures becoming more naturalistic while retaining their ceremonial dignity. Literary works, though mostly lost to us, apparently included epic poems celebrating Persian history and collections of wisdom literature drawing from all corners of the empire. The reign of Darius II, 423 to 404 BCE, exemplifies the palace intrigue that increasingly plagued the Achaemenid dynasty. Born as Okus, he was initially excluded from succession as the son of a Babylonian concubine. But through cunning manipulation and strategic marriages, particularly to his half-sister Parysatis, one of the most formidable women in Persian history, he maneuvered his way to the throne. His reign coincided with the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta, which Persia exploited brilliantly. Rather than direct military intervention, Persian gold flowed to whichever Greek side was losing, prolonging the conflict and weakening both powers. The satrap Tissaphernes and the young prince Cyrus the Younger played elaborate games of alliance and betrayal with Greek generals, demonstrating that Persian power could be exercised through subtlety as effectively as through force. We come now to one of the most dramatic episodes in Persian history. When Darius II died in 404 BCE, the throne passed to his eldest son, Artaxerxes II. But his younger brother, Cyrus the Younger, satrap of Lydia and a favorite of many, including Greek mercenaries who admired his energy and generosity, refused to accept this succession. Gathering an army that included the famous 10,000 Greek hoplites, Cyrus marched into the heart of the empire. The Battle of Cunaxa in 401 BCE near Babylon proved both the strength and weakness of the Persian system. Cyrus's Greeks swept all before them, but Cyrus himself fell in the fighting, struck down, according to dramatic accounts, while attempting to kill his brother personally. With their patron dead, the Greek mercenaries found themselves stranded deep in hostile territory. Their epic march to the Black Sea, immortalized in Xenophon's Anabasis, became a testament to Greek military prowess, but also demonstrated that without Persian administrative support, even victorious armies could barely survive in the empire's vast spaces. Artaxerxes II's long reign of 45 years represents a fascinating period of adaptation and cultural synthesis. Visualize this king not as a warrior like Cyrus or a builder like Darius, but as a curator of civilization. He patronized the restoration of ancient temples, supported the compilation of Zoroastrian texts, and encouraged the translation of works between the empire's many languages. His court became a center of learning where Babylonian astronomers compared observations with Greek mathematicians. The religious landscape of the empire grew increasingly complex during this period. While Zoroastrianism remained the faith of the Persian elite, it never sought to displace local religions. In Babylon, the ancient worship of Marduk continued. In Egypt, Persian pharaohs participated in traditional ceremonies honoring Ra and Osiris. Jewish communities in Babylon and Jerusalem practiced their monotheistic faith under Persian protection. Greek settlers maintained their Olympic gods. This religious diversity, far from weakening the empire, created a rich tapestry of spiritual and philosophical exchange. The challenges, nonetheless, accumulated. The satraps, especially in distant provinces, increasingly acted as independent rulers. Some, like Datames in Cappadocia or Ariobarzanes in Phrygia, raised their own armies and conducted their own foreign policies. The Great Satraps' Revolt of the 360s BCE saw multiple provincial governors simultaneously rebel against central authority, though lack of coordination and Persian gold eventually dissolved their alliance. Egypt broke away again during this period, establishing a native dynasty that would maintain independence for 60 years. Consider how this loss affected Persian prestige. Egypt had been not just a wealthy province, but a symbol of imperial reach, its ancient civilization a jewel in the Persian crown. Its successful rebellion encouraged others to test imperial authority, creating a cascade of challenges that required constant attention and resources to manage. Yet even in this age of troubles, Persian administrative genius continued to manifest. The empire's financial systems grew more sophisticated, with banking houses in Babylon managing international transactions through letters of credit. The road system was maintained and even expanded, facilitating trade that enriched all participants. Legal reforms created more uniform procedures while still respecting local customs. The famous Elephantine papyri from this period show Jewish mercenaries in Egyptian service under Persian oversight, conducting their daily affairs in Aramaic, the empire's administrative language. We turn to the brief but significant reign of Artaxerxes III, 358 to 338 BCE. This energetic ruler temporarily reversed the empire's decline through sheer force of will and ruthless efficiency. He reconquered Egypt in a brutal campaign, suppressed rebellions in Phoenicia and Cyprus, and reimposed central authority on wayward satraps. For a moment, it seemed the empire had recovered its ancient vigor. But Artaxerxes III's methods, which included massacring rebellious populations and executing numerous members of the royal family to prevent rival claims, created fear rather than loyalty. When he was poisoned by his minister Bagoas in 338 BCE, few mourned his passing. Bagoas then placed Arses on the throne, only to murder him too when he proved insufficiently pliable. The eunuch minister finally elevated Darius III, a distant royal relative, expecting another puppet. Instead, Darius promptly executed Bagoas, but by then, irreparable damage had been done to royal prestige and governmental stability. Pause to consider the irony of timing. Just as Persia struggled with internal chaos, a new power was rising in the west. In Macedonia, Philip II had transformed a backward kingdom into a military powerhouse. His son Alexander had been educated by Aristotle and dreamed of Eastern conquest. The collision between the ancient Persian Empire and this dynamic new force would reshape the map of the known world. The Persia that faced Alexander's invasion in 334 BCE was neither the dynamic power of Cyrus's day nor a decadent, collapsing state as Greek propaganda suggested. It remained enormously wealthy, culturally sophisticated, and administratively complex. Its armies, though perhaps lacking the innovative edge of earlier periods, were still formidable. Its diverse populations, while not uniformly loyal, were far from universally disaffected. The coming conflict would be a genuine contest between two different visions of empire. Rest peacefully in the knowledge that even endings can be beginnings, that the apparent death of the Achaemenid Empire would lead to new forms of Persian civilization. The story of Persia extends far beyond any single dynasty, flowing like a great river through time, sometimes disappearing underground only to emerge again, refreshed and renewed. Continue your peaceful journey through the mists of time past the whirlwind of Alexander's conquest. The young Macedonian king had swept through the Persian Empire like a storm, defeating Darius III in 3 great battles and claiming the throne of the King of Kings for himself. Yet Alexander's death in Babylon in 323 BCE, at the age of just 32, shattered his vast conquests into fragments fought over by his generals, the Diadochi. Picture the strange twilight period that followed. In the eastern satrapies of the fallen Persian Empire, Macedonian and Greek settlers established cities and kingdoms, creating a hybrid Hellenistic Iranian culture. The Seleucid dynasty, founded by Alexander's general Seleucus, claimed to rule the Asian portions of Alexander's empire from Syria to India. But their control over the Iranian plateau was always tenuous, dependent more on the acquiescence of local nobles than on true dominance. It was from the northeastern margins of Iran, from the region known as Parthia, that Persian revival would come. Imagine the windswept steppes south of the Caspian Sea, where nomadic peoples called the Pani had migrated from Central Asia. Their leader, Arsaces, was perhaps a minor noble who had served the Seleucids before seizing opportunity in the chaos of the mid-3rd century BCE. Around 247 BCE, he established what would become the Parthian Empire, though its beginnings were so humble that no one could have predicted its eventual greatness. The early Parthian kings faced constant threats: Seleucid armies from the west, nomadic incursions from the north, and the skepticism of settled Iranian peoples who saw them as barbarian upstarts. Yet they possessed qualities that would serve them well: superb horsemanship, military innovation, and most importantly, the wisdom to present themselves not as foreign conquerors, but as heirs to the Achaemenid legacy. They adopted Persian court ceremonies, claimed descent from Artaxerxes II, and gradually won the support of the old nobility. The true founder of Parthian greatness was Mithridates I, who ruled from 171 to 132 BCE. Like Cyrus before him, he combined military prowess with cultural sensitivity. Moving westward, he conquered Media and Babylonia, capturing the great city of Seleucia on the Tigris. Moving eastward, he extended Parthian power into Bactria and the borders of India. By his death, the Parthians controlled most of the old Persian heartland. But the Parthians created something new rather than simply restoring the old. Where the Achaemenids had favored centralized administration, the Parthians developed a more feudal system. Local kings and nobles maintained significant autonomy in exchange for military service and tribute. This decentralized structure, while sometimes causing internal conflicts, gave the empire remarkable resilience. When enemies defeated one army or captured one region, others continued fighting independently. Visualize the unique military system that made Parthia Rome's most persistent rival. The Parthian cavalry, both heavy and light, revolutionized ancient warfare. Their mounted archers, using powerful composite bows, could shoot accurately while riding at full gallop, even backward, giving rise to the phrase Parthian shot. Their cataphracts, both horse and rider, encased in scale armor, could shatter infantry formations with devastating charges. The Battle of Qajar in 53 BCE demonstrated Parthian military superiority in dramatic fashion. The Roman triumvir Crassus, seeking glory to match his rivals Pompey and Caesar, led 7 legions into Mesopotamia. In the desert near Qajar, Parthian cavalry under Surena annihilated the Roman force. Crassus was killed, his head sent to the Parthian king, and the legion standards, Rome's most sacred military symbols, were captured. The shock to Roman pride was profound and lasting. The empire became a crucial link in the Silk Road, controlling the trade routes between China and Rome. Parthian merchants grew fabulously wealthy, facilitating this exchange, and with wealth came artistic patronage. A distinctive Parthian art style emerged, blending Hellenistic naturalism with Iranian frontality and decoration. Their coins show kings with elaborate costumes and carefully styled hair and beards, projecting an image of sophisticated power. In religion, the Parthians continued the Achaemenid tradition of tolerance while showing particular favor to Zoroastrianism. Fire temples were maintained and expanded, and the Magi retained their influence at court. Yet Buddhism flourished in the eastern provinces, Jewish communities prospered in Babylonia, and various mystery cults found adherents. This religious diversity enriched intellectual life, with Parthian scholars serving as intermediaries between Eastern and Western philosophical traditions. Consider the remarkable stability of Parthian rule. For nearly 500 years, the Sassanid dynasty maintained power despite constant challenges. They fought wars with Rome that seesawed back and forth across Mesopotamia, Mark Antony's disastrous invasion, Trajan's temporary conquests, and countless border skirmishes. Yet the Parthians always recovered, their decentralized system allowing them to bend without breaking. The peak of Parthian power came under rulers like Mithridates II, the Great, 124 to 88 BCE, and Orodes II, 57 to 37 BCE. These kings presided over a vast empire stretching from the Euphrates to the Indus, a worthy successor to the Achaemenids. Their courts at Ctesiphon near modern Baghdad became centers of luxury and learning, where Greek philosophers debated with Zoroastrian priests and Indian mathematicians, compared notes with Babylonian astronomers. The Parthians developed their own script, adapted from Aramaic, and their own literary traditions. Though much has been lost, fragments suggest epic poems celebrating both Sassanid heroes and figures from the Achaemenid past. The Vis and Ramin, a romance that influenced the medieval Persian poet Ferdowsi, likely originated in the Parthian period. Music and dance flourished, with Parthian instruments and melodies spreading both east and west along trade routes. The Parthian system of governance, though effective for centuries, contained inherent weaknesses that eventually proved fatal. The very autonomy that gave the empire flexibility also created centrifugal forces. Powerful noble families, the Surin, the Karen, the Mihran, sometimes pursued policies that conflicted with royal interests. Succession disputes became increasingly violent as different factions backed rival claimants to the throne. By the early 3rd century CE, these internal divisions had reached a critical point. In the province of Persis, the ancient Persian heartland, a local dynasty called the Sassanians had been growing in power and ambition. They claimed direct descent from the Achaemenids, dismissing the Parthians as foreign usurpers. When Ardashir, the Sasanian leader, revolted against the last Parthian king, Artabanus IV, he found support among those who yearned for a more centralized, more explicitly Persian regime. The Battle of Hormozgan in 224 CE marked the end of Parthian rule and the beginning of a new chapter in Persian history. Reflect on the Parthian achievement. For half a millennium, they had maintained Persian independence against the might of Rome. They had facilitated unprecedented cultural and economic exchange between East and West. They had preserved and transmitted the Zoroastrian religious tradition and much of ancient Iranian culture. Most importantly, the Parthians had proven that Persian civilization could survive conquest and transformation. Like the mythical phoenix, it could die and be reborn, each incarnation different yet connected to what came before. The Sassanians who followed would build on this foundation, creating their own version of Persian glory. The thread of continuity, woven through different dynasties and systems, would continue unbroken. Rest peacefully in the assurance that civilizations, like individuals, possess a resilience that transcends any single manifestation. The Parthian Empire may have fallen, but the idea of Iran, the cultural and spiritual essence of Persia, lived on. Perhaps you will glimpse in your dreams tonight the caravan routes where merchants carried not just silk and spices, but ideas and innovations, where the material and spiritual wealth of humanity flowed like rivers converging into a mighty stream. Allow your mind to witness the magnificent resurrection of Persian power under the Sassanid dynasty. Picture Ardashir, son of Papak, descendant of Sassan, standing victorious on the battlefield of Hormozgan. Unlike the Parthian kings who had claimed a distant connection to the Achaemenids, Ardashir proclaimed direct spiritual and blood descent from the ancient Persian royalty. He had not merely defeated a rival, he had restored what he saw as the legitimate Persian monarchy. The transformation was swift and profound. Where the Parthians had ruled through a loose confederation of nobles, Ardashir established a centralized state that recalled the administrative efficiency of Darius the Great. Visualize the energy with which this new dynasty set about reshaping the Iranian world. Fire temples that had fallen into disrepair were rebuilt grander than before. The Avesta, the sacred texts of Zoroastrianism, was collected and codified. A new capital rose at Ctesiphon, its massive arched palace, the Tak-Kasra, becoming one of the wonders of the ancient world. Ardashir's son, Shapur I, who ruled from 240 to 270 CE, elevated the Sassanid Empire to heights that rivaled the greatest days of the Achaemenids. Picture this remarkable king, tall and commanding, leading his armies to victory after victory. He defeated the Roman Emperor Gordian III, captured the Emperor Philip the Arab, and most spectacularly took the Emperor Valerian prisoner, the only Roman emperor ever to suffer such a fate. These triumphs were immortalized in massive rock reliefs that can still be seen today, showing Roman emperors kneeling before the mounted Persian Shah. But Shapur was more than a warrior. Like the greatest Persian rulers before him, he understood that true power lay in synthesis and tolerance. He established cities populated with Roman prisoners who brought their skills and knowledge to Persia. He patronized scholars who translated Greek and Indian texts into Pahlavi, the Middle Persian language. Most remarkably, he protected the prophet Mani, founder of Manichaeism, allowing this new religion to spread throughout his empire, despite opposition from Zoroastrian priests. The Sassanid period witnessed an extraordinary renaissance in every field of human endeavor. In medicine, the Great Academy at Gundashapur became the world's leading center of healing arts, where Persian, Greek, Indian, and Syrian physicians exchanged knowledge. The Sassanids developed surgical techniques, catalogued medicinal plants, and established the first teaching hospitals where students could observe master physicians at work. In astronomy and mathematics, Sassanid scholars built upon Babylonian and Greek foundations to make original contributions. They calculated the length of the year with remarkable precision, developed new instruments for celestial observation, and created mathematical tables that would later influence both Islamic and European science. The Ziji Shah, a collection of astronomical tables, represented the most advanced understanding of planetary motion before the modern era. Contemplate the religious landscape of Sassanid Persia. Zoroastrianism was established as the state religion with a formal hierarchy headed by the Mobedan Mobed, the priest of priests. Yet this official dominance coexisted with remarkable diversity. Christian communities flourished, particularly the Nestorian Church, which found refuge in Persia from Byzantine persecution. Jewish academies in Babylonia produced the Babylonian Talmud, one of Judaism's most important texts. Buddhist monasteries dotted the eastern provinces. The greatest of the Sassanid monarchs was Khosrow Anushirvan of the Immortal Soul, who reigned from 531 to 579 CE. Envision this philosopher king who embodied the Persian ideal of the just ruler. He reformed the tax system to ensure fairness, established fixed salaries for soldiers and officials to reduce corruption, and created a system of appeals courts where common people could seek justice against abuse by nobles. Khosrow's thirst for knowledge was legendary. When the Byzantine Emperor Justinian closed the Academy of Athens, the last pagan philosophical school, its scholars found welcome at the Persian court. Khosrow personally participated in philosophical discussions and commissioned translations of major works. The game of chess, arriving from India, was refined at his court with the addition of new pieces and rules. The collection of animal fables, known as Kalila Wadimna, was translated from Sanskrit, beginning its journey to become one of the world's most widely read books. The magnificence of Sassanid achievement filled every aspect of life. Their art reached unprecedented heights, from the detailed silver plates showing royal hunts to the massive rock reliefs depicting cosmic battles between good and evil. Sassanid textiles, woven with impossibly intricate patterns of fantastic animals and paradise gardens, were prized from Constantinople to Chang'an. Their architecture achieved new heights of ambition. Vast palace complexes, fire temples with ever-burning flames, and cities laid out according to cosmic principles. The military innovations of the Sassanids matched their cultural achievements. They perfected the heavy cavalry that the Parthians had pioneered, creating the Klibanari. Warriors so heavily armored they resembled moving fortresses. They developed sophisticated siege warfare techniques, including early forms of chemical weapons using sulfur and bitumen. Their organization of the army into 4 commands corresponding to the cardinal directions reflected the cosmic order that underpinned their worldview. Reflect on the unique character of Sassanid society. They developed a complex class system, priests, warriors, farmers, and artisans, that provided social stability while allowing some mobility through merit. Women in Sassanid Persia enjoyed rights unusual for the ancient world. They could own property, manage businesses, serve as witnesses in court, and even rule as regents. Several Sassanid queens left their mark on history through political acumen and patronage of arts. The later Sassanid period saw increasing challenges that would ultimately prove insurmountable. The eternal conflict with Rome, transformed into struggle with its Byzantine successor, drained resources and energy. Khosrow II Parviz, 590 to 628 CE, achieved spectacular initial success, conquering Syria, Palestine, and Egypt, even carrying off the true cross from Jerusalem. For a moment, it seemed the Achaemenid Empire had been restored, but the Byzantine Emperor Heraclius struck back with devastating effect, invading the Persian heartland and forcing a humiliating peace. The exhaustion from centuries of warfare with Byzantium left both empires vulnerable to an unexpected threat. In the Arabian Peninsula, a new force was gathering: Islam, united under the banner of the Prophet Muhammad and his successors. The Arabs, long dismissed as desert nomads, useful only as buffer states, suddenly emerged as a world-conquering power. The last great Sassanid king, Yazdegerd III, fought valiantly against the Arab invasion, but the empire, weakened by war, plague, and internal strife, could not withstand this fresh assault. The Battle of Qadisiyah in 636 CE broke Sassanid power in Mesopotamia. The Battle of Nahavand in 642 CE, which the Arabs called the Victory of Victories, sealed the fate of the Sassanid Empire. Yazdegerd fled eastward, seeking help that never came, until he was murdered near Merv in 651 CE. Understand that the fall of the Sassanids was not the end of Persian civilization, but another transformation. The Arabs, like the Macedonians before them, would find themselves profoundly influenced by Persian culture. Persian administrators would run the caliphate's bureaucracy. Persian scholars would help create the golden age of Islamic science. Persian poets would elevate Arabic and later Persian literature to new heights. The Sassanid legacy lived on in countless ways. The Sassanids had maintained the sacred fire of Persian civilization for over 4 centuries, passing it on stronger and brighter than they had received it. They had created a vision of divine kingship, just rule, and cosmic order that would influence political thought across Eurasia. They had fostered scientific and philosophical achievements that would enrich human knowledge for centuries. Most importantly, they had proven once again that Persia could rise from apparent destruction to new heights of glory. Rest peacefully in the certainty that great civilizations never truly die but transform, like energy, change in form, but never disappearing. Perhaps in your dreams you will see the sacred fires burning in their temples, eternal flames representing the undying spirit of human achievement and divine aspiration. Let your mind contemplate the profound transformations that swept across the Persian lands following the Arab conquest. The year 651 CE marked not an ending but a metamorphosis, as Persian civilization began to weave itself into the fabric of the expanding Islamic world. Like a mighty river changing course, but not ceasing to flow, Persian culture would profoundly shape the civilization of its conquerors, even as it was transformed by them. In the immediate aftermath of conquest, picture the confusion and upheaval. Zoroastrian fire temples, some burning continuously for centuries, were extinguished. The Sassanid administrative apparatus, one of the most sophisticated in the world, suddenly lacked direction from the center. Noble families fled eastward or came to terms with new masters. Yet beneath this surface disruption, deeper currents of continuity flowed strongly. The Arab conquerors, brilliant in warfare but initially unprepared for governing a complex empire, quickly recognized the value of Persian expertise. Persian administrators, using their ancient skills, became indispensable to the new order. The Deccans, the local gentry who had managed rural estates for centuries, continued in their roles. The elaborate taxation systems, court protocols, and bureaucratic procedures developed over millennia were adopted wholesale by the caliphate. Within decades, a remarkable synthesis began to emerge. The Persian language, while temporarily eclipsed by Arabic in official usage, survived and evolved in the countryside and among the educated classes. Pahlavi gradually transformed into New Persian, written now in Arabic script but maintaining its essential Iranian character. This linguistic evolution paralleled a broader cultural transformation that would produce some of humanity's greatest artistic achievements. The Abbasid Revolution of 750 CE, which overthrew the Umayyad Caliphate, succeeded largely through Persian support. The new dynasty moved the capital from Damascus to Baghdad, a new city built on the ruins of Ctesiphon, symbolically centering the Islamic world in the ancient heartland of Persian empires. The Barmakid family, Persian Buddhists who had converted to Islam, became the power behind the throne, managing the empire with traditional Persian administrative wisdom. The translation movement that flourished under the early Abbasids represents one of history's great intellectual flowerings. Envision the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, where Persian scholars worked alongside Arabs, Greeks, and Indians. Texts on medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy were translated from Pahlavi into Arabic, preserving Sassanid learning for posterity. The works of Buzurgmir, Borzuya, and other Persian sages influenced Islamic thought profoundly. In the realm of religious thought, Persian contributions proved transformative. Zoroastrian concepts of cosmic dualism, angelology, and eschatology enriched Islamic theology. Persian mystics, drawing on ancient spiritual traditions, helped develop Sufism, the mystical dimension of Islam that would produce poets like Rumi and Hafez. The idea of divine love, the spiritual journey, and the perfect human being, al-insan al-kamil, bore unmistakable Persian influences. Observe the emergence of autonomous Persian dynasties within the Islamic framework. The Tahirids, Safavids, and Samanids successively established regional power in eastern Iran, each contributing to a Persian cultural renaissance. Under the Samanids, 819 to 999 CE, centered in Bukhara and Samarkand, new Persian literature was born. Rudaki, the father of Persian poetry, sang at their court. Ferdowsi began composing the Shahnameh, the epic poem that would preserve pre-Islamic Persian history and legend for all time. The Shahnameh deserves special contemplation. This monumental work, comprising some 50,000 couplets, took Ferdowsi 30 years to complete. It tells the story of Persia from the creation of the world through the Arab conquest, preserving ancient legends, celebrating heroic values, and maintaining Persian identity through poetic genius. Kings like Jamshid, heroes like Rostam, and villains like Zahak became immortal through Ferdowsi's verses. The development of Persian as a literary language of unparalleled beauty represents one of humanity's great cultural achievements. The ghazal, with its intricate rhyme schemes and mystical overtones, became the supreme form of lyric expression. The rubai, or quatrain, perfected by Omar Khayyam, compressed profound philosophy into 4 elegant lines. The Masnavi, used for epic narratives, carried forward ancient storytelling traditions in new forms. Persian influence extended far beyond literature into every aspect of Islamic civilization. In architecture, the 4-Iwan mosque plan, the use of colored tiles, and the integration of gardens into religious complexes all showed Persian inspiration. The Paradise Garden, with its quadripartite design representing the 4 rivers of paradise, transformed Islamic concepts of sacred space. The dome, perfected by Sassanid architects, became the crown of Islamic architecture from Cordoba to Delhi. Contemplate the Persian contribution to Islamic science. Building on Sassanid foundations, Persian scholars made groundbreaking discoveries. Al-Razi's advanced medicine through clinical observation and the systematic classification of diseases. Ibn Sina, Avicenna, whose canon of medicine would dominate both Islamic and European healing arts for centuries, synthesized Greek, Persian, and Arab medical knowledge. Omar Khayyam solved cubic equations and reformed the calendar with greater accuracy than the Gregorian reform. The Persian concept of adab, refined culture, proper conduct, and encyclopedic learning became central to Islamic civilization. This ideal, rooted in Sassanid court culture, emphasized that a truly educated person must master not only religious sciences, but also poetry, history, mathematics, and the arts of conversation and correspondence. The Persian secretarial class, inheritors of ancient scribal traditions, set standards of literary elegance that influenced Arabic prose profoundly. Observe the Persianization of Turkish power. The Ghaznavids, Seljuks, and other Turkish dynasties that dominated the Eastern Islamic world from the 10th century onward became thoroughly Persianized in culture. They patronized Persian poets, adopted Persian administrative systems, and spread Persian cultural influence from Anatolia to India. The great Seljuk vizier Nizam al-Mulk wrote his treatise on government, the Siyasatnama, in Persian, codifying centuries of Iranian political wisdom. Persian mystical philosophy reached new heights during this period. Illuminationist thinkers like Suhrawardi created sophisticated systems that blended Platonic, Zoroastrian, and Islamic elements. The concept of the imaginal world, Alam al-Mithal, a realm between the physical and purely spiritual, provided a philosophical framework for understanding mystical experience. This tradition would profoundly influence later Islamic thought and eventually European esotericism. Reflect on the religious diversity that persisted in Persian lands despite Islamic dominance. Zoroastrian communities, though diminished, maintained their traditions in Yazd and Kerman. Nestorian Christians continued their scholarly activities. Jewish communities flourished, producing important religious and philosophical works. Even Buddhism lingered in eastern regions until the Mongol invasions. This diversity enriched the cultural mixture that made Persian lands so intellectually vibrant. The material culture of medieval Persia dazzled visitors from every land. Persian carpets, with their intricate patterns encoding paradise gardens and cosmic diagrams, became prized possessions from Spain to China. Metalwork inlaid with silver and gold displayed unprecedented craftsmanship. Ceramics developed new techniques of glazing and decoration that influenced pottery traditions across Eurasia. Miniature painting evolved into a distinctively Persian art form, creating jewel-like illustrations for manuscripts. Rest in the understanding that cultural transformation need not mean cultural death. The Persia that emerged from the crucible of Islamic conquest was different from its Sassanid predecessor, but no less distinctively Iranian. Like a master musician improvising on an ancient melody, Persian civilization had taken new elements and woven them into patterns that were both fresh and familiar. The sacred fire of Zoroaster may have dimmed, but the light of Persian creativity burned as brightly as ever. Perhaps tonight you will glimpse in your dreams the courts where Persian poets sang of divine love and earthly beauty, the observatories where astronomers mapped the heavens, the gardens where mystics contemplated the unity of existence. All these strands would weave together to create a cultural tapestry of unparalleled richness, one that would continue to inspire and influence long after the political structures that supported it had passed away. Let your mind turn to one of history's great catastrophes and subsequent rebirths. The 13th century brought to Persian lands a devastation so complete that it seemed civilization itself might never recover. Yet from these ashes would rise new forms of Persian greatness, demonstrating once again the extraordinary resilience of Iranian culture. Picture the Persian world on the eve of the Mongol invasion. The eastern regions flourished under the Khwarezmshah dynasty, controlling vast territories from the Caspian to the Indian Ocean. Cities like Bukhara, Samarkand, Nishapur, and Herat ranked among the most populous and cultured in the world. Libraries contained hundreds of thousands of manuscripts. Irrigation systems, perfected over millennia, supported millions of people. This was a civilization at its peak, unaware of the storm approaching from the steppes. The catalyst for catastrophe came through diplomatic folly. When Genghis Khan sent a trade mission to Khwarezm in 1218, the governor of Otrar had the merchants executed as spies and their goods confiscated. The Khwarezmshah Muhammad II, perhaps overconfident in his power, supported his governor's actions. This insult to Mongol honor would bring consequences beyond anyone's imagination. Witness the horror that followed. Genghis Khan's armies poured into Persian lands with a fury that seemed almost supernatural. City after city fell to sophisticated siege techniques and utter ruthlessness. Bukhara, the crown jewel of Islamic learning, was burned after its inhabitants were forced to fill the moats with their possessions. Samarkand's artisans were deported en masse. Nishapur was so thoroughly destroyed that the Mongols ordered the skulls of the slain piled into pyramids as a warning. The scale of destruction defies comprehension even today. Contemporary Persian historians, writing with trembling hands, estimated deaths in the millions. Entire regions were depopulated. The ancient Qanat irrigation systems, requiring constant maintenance, fell into disrepair, turning fertile lands into desert. Libraries burned, taking with them irreplaceable works of science, philosophy, and literature. One chronicler wrote that the Mongols had uprooted every tree and plant of civilization. Yet even in the blackest night, stars continue to shine. Some cities, through quick surrender or clever negotiation, escaped the worst. Persian administrators who submitted found themselves valued by Mongol rulers who needed their expertise. The Persian language, far from disappearing, became the administrative tongue of the Mongol Ilkhanate that ruled Iran. Within a generation, the conquerors were becoming Persianized. Observe the remarkable process of cultural absorption that followed. The Ilkhanid rulers, descendants of Hulagu Khan, Genghis's grandson, gradually adopted Persian customs, artistic tastes, and eventually Islam itself. They rebuilt cities, patronized scholars and poets, and commissioned architectural projects that blended Mongol, Chinese, and Persian elements into something entirely new. The tomb of Olyaitu at Sultaniye, with its double-shell dome covered in turquoise tiles, represents one of the masterpieces of world architecture. This period of Mongol rule, lasting from 1256 to 1335, witnessed unexpected cultural flowering. The enforced Pax Mongolica connected Persia to China more closely than ever before. Chinese artistic techniques influenced Persian miniature painting, creating a new synthesis of unprecedented delicacy. Persian scholars gained access to Chinese scientific knowledge, while Persian astronomical works traveled eastward. The historian Rashid al-Din composed the first truly world history, drawing on Mongol, Chinese, Indian, and European sources. Perhaps the greatest Persian poet, Hafez of Shiraz, 1315 to 1390, emerged during this time of political chaos. Living as various powers competed for control after the Ilkhanate's collapse, Hafez created poetry of such beauty and profundity that it seemed to transcend earthly troubles. His ghazals, with their intricate interplay of mystical and earthly love, their celebration of wine and beauty as paths to divine truth, captured something essential in the Persian spirit. To this day, many Iranians consult his divan for guidance, opening it at random to find verses that speak to their condition. Witness the brief but brilliant flame of Tamerlane, Timur, who claimed descent from both Genghis Khan and the Persian hero tradition. His conquests in the late 14th century brought fresh destruction, but his capital at Samarkand became a center of Persian culture. His grandson Ulugh Beg built an astronomical observatory that produced star tables of unprecedented accuracy. The Timurid period saw Persian miniature painting reach absolute perfection, with artists like Behzad creating works of almost supernatural beauty. But the true Persian Renaissance would come with the Safavid dynasty, 1501 to 1736, which achieved what had seemed impossible, the political and spiritual reunification of Iran. Picture the young Shah Ismail I, claiming descent from both the Prophet Muhammad and the Sassanid kings, entering Tabriz in 1501. His declaration of Twelver Shi'ism as the state religion would transform Iran permanently, creating a distinct identity that separated it from the Sunni Ottoman and Mughal empires. The Safavids consciously evoked ancient Persian glory while creating something entirely new. They revived Sassanid titles and ceremonies, patronized the composition of epic poetry celebrating pre-Islamic heroes, and built architectural wonders that rivaled anything from the past. Under Shah Abbas I, 1588 to 1629, Isfahan became one of the world's most magnificent cities. Half the world, Persians said, was Isfahan. Its grand square, surrounded by the Shah Mosque, the Sheikh Lotfollah Mosque, and the Ali Kapu Palace, created an urban ensemble of unmatched harmony. The beauty of Safavid achievement reached every aspect of life. The famous Persian carpets of this era, with their garden patterns and hunting scenes, reached levels of technical and artistic perfection never surpassed. Safavid ceramics, metalwork, and textiles adorned palaces from India to Europe. The art of the book, combining calligraphy, illumination, miniature painting, and binding, created objects of almost talismanic power. Safavid Persia became a major player in the first age of globalization. Armenian merchants settled in Isfahan's new Yulfa quarter connected Persian trade to networks spanning from Amsterdam to Manila. European ambassadors and merchants marveled at Persian sophistication. The Safavid court became a cosmopolitan center where Persian Muslims, Armenian Christians, Jewish traders, and European visitors mingled in an atmosphere of relative tolerance. The intellectual achievements of the Safavid period matched its artistic glories. The school of Isfahan, led by philosophers like Mir Damad and Mulla Sadra, created a synthesis of Aristotelian logic, illuminationist wisdom, and mystical gnosis that represents one of the peaks of Islamic philosophy. These thinkers addressed fundamental questions about existence, consciousness, and the nature of reality, with a sophistication that would later influence European thought through translations and interpretations. Consider how the Safavids also transformed Persian religious life. The establishment of Shi'ism as the state religion was not merely a political act, but a profound cultural revolution. The Passion plays commemorating the martyrdom of Hussein at Karbala became central to Iranian identity. The concept of the hidden imam, waiting to return and establish justice, provided a messianic dimension to Persian spirituality. The integration of Sufi mysticism into Shi'i practice created a uniquely Persian form of Islam. Yet even as the Safavids reached these heights, forces were gathering that would challenge Persian independence. The Ottomans pressed from the west, the Uzbeks from the northeast, and eventually European powers began to show interest in Persian resources and strategic position. The later Safavid rulers, weakened by court intrigue and economic troubles, proved unable to maintain the strength of their predecessors. The dynasty's end came with shocking suddenness. In 1722, Afghan rebels besieged Isfahan, and after months of starvation, the last Safavid Shah surrendered. The following years saw Persia torn apart by various claimants. Afghans, Ottomans, and Russians all seized pieces of the once mighty empire. It seemed that Persian independence might be ending forever. Rest in the knowledge that even this catastrophe would prove temporary. From the chaos emerged Nader Shah, a military genius who expelled all invaders and briefly restored Persian power, even invading India and bringing back the peacock throne. Though his dynasty proved ephemeral, he had demonstrated that Persia could still produce leaders capable of shaking the world. Perhaps in your dreams tonight you will see the magnificent dome of the Sheikh Lotfollah Mosque changing color with the movement of the sun, or hear the verses of Hafez sung in a moonlit garden. These creations of the Persian spirit endure, transcending the rise and fall of dynasties, bearing witness to a civilization that repeatedly proved its ability to transform disaster into beauty, conquest into culture, and suffering into wisdom. Continue your peaceful journey toward the deepest realms of sleep as we witness Persia's encounter with the modern world. The late 18th century found Iran exhausted from decades of civil war following Nader Shah's assassination. From this chaos emerged the Qajar dynasty in 1794, establishing a rule that would last until 1925, but would see Persia transformed from a traditional empire into a nation struggling to find its place in an industrializing world. Picture Agha Muhammad Khan Qajar, the dynasty's founder, a figure both tragic and terrible. Castrated as a child by rivals, he channeled his fury into reunifying Persia through campaigns of legendary brutality. Yet once established in power, he proved an able administrator who restored order to a land that had known only chaos for generations. Tehran, a modest town when he chose it as his capital, would grow into one of the great cities of the Middle East. Observe how the early 19th century brought challenges unlike any Persia had faced before. To the north, the Russian Empire expanded relentlessly southward, its modern armies equipped with weapons and tactics that Persian forces could not match. To the south and east, the British Empire consolidated its hold on India and sought to ensure that no rival power could threaten its jewel in the crown. Persia found itself caught between these two expanding giants in what historians would later call the Great Game. The reigns of Fath Ali Shah, 1797 to 1834, and his successors revealed both the splendor and weakness of Qajar rule. At court, a deliberate revival of ancient Persian ceremonial created a theater of power that dazzled visitors. The Shah's portraits showed him with a beard reaching to his waist, surrounded by imagery evoking Sassanid and Achaemenid glory. Persian decorative arts, lacquerwork, enamel, textiles achieved new heights of refinement. Poetry continued to flourish, with masters like Ka'ani maintaining classical traditions. Yet beneath this glittering surface, structural weaknesses accumulated. The treaties of Gulistan, 1813, and Turkmenchay, 1828, ceded vast territories to Russia, including the ancestral lands of Azerbaijan and the Caucasus. These losses, ratified after military defeats that demonstrated Persia's technological inferiority, shocked a civilization accustomed to viewing itself as divinely favored. The capitulations that granted extraterritorial rights to foreign citizens further eroded Persian sovereignty. Even in this period of weakness, Persian culture continued to evolve and adapt. The Qajar period saw the emergence of new art forms, particularly in painting, where European techniques of perspective and modeling merged with traditional Persian aesthetics. The coffeehouse painting tradition developed, telling epic stories from the Shahnameh to popular audiences. Photography, introduced in the 1840s, was enthusiastically adopted, with Nasser al-Din Shah himself becoming an avid photographer. Witness the awakening of Persian political consciousness in the late 19th century. Intellectuals like Mirza Malcolm Khan and Mirza Akka Khan Kermani, exposed to European ideas through travel or education, began questioning traditional structures. They wrote of the need for law, for limitations on royal power, for educational reform. The concept of mashruteh, constitutionalism, entered Persian political discourse. The tobacco protest of 1891 to 1892 marked a turning point in Persian history. When Nasser al-Din Shah granted a British company monopoly over all tobacco trade in Persia, massive protests erupted. The religious establishment, merchants, and common people united in opposition. When the leading cleric, Mirza Hassan Shirazi, issued a fatwa declaring the use of tobacco forbidden until the concession was cancelled, the boycott was so complete that even the Shah's wives refused to smoke. The government capitulated, demonstrating that coordinated popular action could defeat royal authority. Observe the culmination of these political currents in the constitutional revolution of 1905 to 1911. What began as protests against economic mismanagement and foreign influence evolved into demands for fundamental political change. Merchants closed their shops, clerics preached from their pulpits, and intellectuals wrote passionate appeals. When protesters took sanctuary in the British legation grounds, their numbers swelled to over 10,000. Muzaffar al-Din Shah, ill and facing bankruptcy, capitulated to demands for a parliament, majlis, and constitution. The first majlis, convening in October 1906, included representatives from various social classes and religious minorities. They drafted a constitution that limited royal power, established civil rights, and created an independent judiciary. For a brief moment, it seemed Persia might transform itself into a modern constitutional monarchy. But the path to modernity proved far more difficult than the revolutionaries imagined. Witness the counter-revolution led by Muhammad Ali Shah, who bombarded the Majlis building with Russian-officered Cossack brigades. The civil war that followed saw constitutionalists and royalists battle across the country. Though the constitutionalists eventually triumphed, foreign intervention intensified. In 1907, Britain and Russia signed a convention dividing Persia into spheres of influence, making a mockery of Persian independence. The discovery of oil in 1908 added a new dimension to foreign interest in Persia. The Anglo-Persian Oil Company, later British Petroleum, extracted vast wealth while paying minimal royalties to the Persian government. Consider how this black gold, which should have been a blessing, became another source of foreign domination and internal corruption. The pattern established then, foreign companies exploiting Persian resources while the people remained impoverished, would poison Persian politics for generations. World War I brought fresh catastrophes. Though Persia declared neutrality, Russian, British, Ottoman, and German forces treated the country as a battlefield. Famine and disease followed military operations, killing perhaps 2 million Persians, nearly 20% of the population. The countryside was devastated, cities depopulated, and governmental authority virtually ceased to exist outside Tehran. It seemed the Persian state might finally dissolve entirely. From this, Nadir emerged an unlikely savior. Reza Khan, a soldier from a modest background, rose through the ranks of the Persian Cossack Brigade. In 1921, he marched on Tehran in a near-bloodless coup. By 1925, he had deposed the last Qajar Shah and established the Pahlavi dynasty, taking the ancient title Shah of Iran, significantly using Iran, the country's indigenous name, rather than the Greek-derived Persia. Reza Shah launched a program of rapid modernization that recalled Peter the Great's transformation of Russia. He built railroads, established modern schools and Iran's first university, created a conscript army, and reformed the legal system. Women were encouraged to abandon the veil, Western dress was mandated for men, and the solar calendar replaced the lunar one. These reforms, implemented with authoritarian force, created profound social tensions. Reza Shah also pursued cultural nationalism, commissioning the purification of Persian language from Arabic loanwords and supporting archaeological excavations at Persepolis and other ancient sites. The pre-Islamic past, long overshadowed by Islamic identity, was celebrated as proof of Iranian greatness. This secular nationalism, while modernizing in intent, alienated religious conservatives who saw it as an attack on Islamic values. The Pahlavi transformation had profound consequences. A new middle class emerged, educated in modern schools and employed in governmental bureaucracies or modern businesses. Tehran University became a center of intellectual ferment. Women entered public life as teachers, nurses, and civil servants. Yet traditional society, particularly in rural areas, remained largely unchanged, creating a dual society that would prove inherently unstable. Reflect on the complexities of Persia's encounter with modernity. The constitutional revolution had shown that Persians could mobilize for political change, but foreign interference and internal divisions prevented the establishment of genuine democracy. The discovery of oil brought potential wealth, but also intensified foreign exploitation. Modernization created new opportunities, but also threatened traditional values and social structures. By 1941, when British and Soviet forces invaded Iran to secure oil supplies and transportation routes during World War II, forcing Reza Shah to abdicate in favor of his son, Mohammad Reza, the transformation of Persia into modern Iran was well underway, but far from complete. The ancient empire had become a nation-state, but one still struggling to balance its glorious past with an uncertain future, its desire for independence with the realities of international power politics, its traditional culture with the demands of modernity. Rest in the understanding that this struggle continues to shape Iran today. The constitutional revolution's ideals of law, popular sovereignty, and national dignity remain powerful forces in Iranian political consciousness. The tension between tradition and modernity, between religious and secular visions of society, between nationalism and engagement with the world, all have their roots in this transformative period. Perhaps tonight you will glimpse in your dreams the brave constitutionalists taking refuge in the telegraph office, sending news of their struggle to the world, or see the workers laying rails for the Trans-Iranian Railway across impossible terrain, or hear the voices of women entering Tehran University for the first time. These images of struggle and hope, of transformation and resistance, capture the essence of a civilization refusing to surrender its identity even as it sought to embrace the modern world. As you approach the deepest, most restorative phase of sleep, let us conclude our journey through Persian history by contemplating the enduring legacy of this remarkable civilization. Like the sacred flames that once burned eternally in Zoroastrian fire temples, the spirit of Persia has never been extinguished, continuing to illuminate human culture and consciousness across the millennia. Consider first the linguistic legacy Persia has bestowed upon the world. The Persian language itself, having survived conquest by Arabs, Turks, and Mongols, remains one of the world's great literary tongues. Spoken in various forms from Tehran to Tajikistan, from Afghanistan to the Persian Gulf, it connects millions to a cultural heritage stretching back 3,000 years. Words of Persian origin have enriched languages across the globe. Paradise from Paradisa, magic from magi, pajamas from pajama, bazaar, caravan, chess, each word a small ambassador of Persian civilization. Reflect on Persia's monumental contribution to world literature. The stories that emerged from Persian imagination have become part of humanity's shared heritage. The tales of the 1001 Nights, though compiled in Arabic, draw heavily on Persian sources. The romance of Layla and Majnun, the adventures of Sinbad, the wisdom of Luqman, these narratives have shaped imaginations from Morocco to Indonesia. The Shahnameh's heroes, Rostam, Sohrab, Siavash, embody universal themes of heroism, tragedy, and redemption that speak to every culture. Persian poetry, in particular, has achieved a universality rarely matched in world literature. Rumi, the 13th century mystic whose verses were composed in Persian, has become one of the best-selling poets in modern America. His words about love, spiritual seeking, and human transformation transcend all boundaries of time, place, and religion. Hafez's ghazals are consulted for guidance not only in Iran, but wherever Persian culture has touched. Omar Khayyam's quatrains, through Edward Fitzgerald's translation, became beloved in Victorian England and remain quoted worldwide. Consider Persia's religious and philosophical legacy. Zoroastrianism, the first monotheistic religion to develop a sophisticated theology of good and evil, free will and judgment, paradise and hell, profoundly influenced Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The Zoroastrian emphasis on good thoughts, good words, and good deeds provided an ethical framework that transcends any particular religious tradition. Concepts of angels and demons, of a savior figure who will renovate the world, of the final triumph of light over darkness, all these entered Western consciousness through Persian religious genius. Persian contributions to Islamic civilization are so fundamental that Islam as we know it would be unrecognizable without them. The development of Sufism, with its emphasis on divine love and mystical union, drew heavily on pre-Islamic Persian spiritual traditions. The philosophical synthesis achieved by Persian thinkers like Ibn Sina and Suhrawardi created intellectual frameworks that influenced not only the Islamic world, but also medieval Europe. The Persian concept of adab, cultured behavior combining learning, refinement, and ethical conduct, became the ideal of Islamic civilization from Spain to Southeast Asia. Contemplate Persia's architectural legacy. The Persian garden, with its quadripartite design symbolizing the four rivers of paradise, became the model for Islamic gardens, from the Alhambra to the Taj Mahal. The Ivan, the vaulted hall open on one side, transformed mosque architecture. The dome, perfected by Persian architects, crowned buildings from Istanbul to Isfahan. The integration of water, light, and geometric pattern in Persian architecture created spaces that seemed to dissolve the boundary between earth and heaven. Persian innovations in governance and administration left equally lasting marks. The concept of a universal empire respecting local customs, first implemented by Cyrus, provided a model of tolerant imperialism that influenced subsequent conquerors. The satrapy system, with its balance of central control and local autonomy, was adopted by Alexander and his successors. The Sassanid institution of the divan, or governmental department, was taken over by the Arabs and spread throughout the Islamic world. Even the word checkmate comes from the Persian Shah mat. The king is dead, reminding us that Persians transformed an Indian board game into the chess we know today. Consider Persian contributions to science and mathematics. The decimal system, though Indian in origin, was transmitted to the Islamic world and then Europe through Persian mathematicians. Al-Khwarizmi, whose name gives us algorithm, was Persian, as was Omar Khayyam, who solved cubic equations centuries before European mathematicians. Persian astronomers maintained and refined the observations of antiquity, creating star tables and calendars of remarkable accuracy. The astrolabe, that elegant instrument for navigation and timekeeping, was perfected by Persian craftsmen. In medicine, Persian physicians synthesized Greek, Indian, and indigenous knowledge to create a sophisticated healing tradition. The Canon of Medicine by Ibn Sina remained a standard medical textbook in Europe until the 17th century. Persian doctors pioneered the use of alcohol for antisepsis, developed surgical techniques for cataracts, and created the first teaching hospitals. The Persian emphasis on the psychological aspects of illness anticipated modern psychosomatic medicine by 1,000 years. Reflect on how Persian culture has enriched the daily life of billions. The bazaar, that quintessentially Persian institution combining commerce, craftsmanship, and social interaction, became the model for markets across the Islamic world. Persian cuisine, with its subtle use of herbs, its balance of sweet and sour, its elegant rice dishes and stews, has influenced cooking from Turkey to India. The tradition of hospitality, of sharing tea and conversation, of creating beautiful spaces for human interaction. These Persian values have spread wherever Persian culture has touched. The Persian aesthetic sense, the love of beauty, refinement and elegance, has left its mark on decorative arts worldwide. Persian carpets remain the gold standard of weaving, their patterns encoding gardens of paradise and cosmic diagrams. Persian miniature painting influenced artistic traditions from Ottoman Turkey to Mughal India. The Persian love of calligraphy elevated writing itself into high art. Even today, in museums and private collections worldwide, objects of Persian creation are treasured for their beauty and craftsmanship. Consider how the Persian approach to life, emphasizing beauty, poetry, gardens, and refined pleasure alongside spiritual seeking, offers an alternative to purely materialistic values. The Persian concept of hal, those moments of spiritual intoxication induced by poetry, music, or mystical practice, suggests that peak experiences are not rare exceptions, but can be cultivated through art and contemplation. The integration of sensual and spiritual, earthly and divine, rational and mystical in Persian culture provides a model of human wholeness. In the modern world, the Persian legacy continues to evolve and influence. Iranian cinema, with directors like Abbas Kiarostami and Asghar Farhadi, has achieved international acclaim for its poetic sensibility and humanistic vision. Persian classical music, with its intricate modal systems and improvisational genius, influences world music fusion. Contemporary Persian poets and novelists, writing both within Iran and in the diaspora, continue the ancient tradition of using beauty to speak truth to power. The Persian diaspora, scattered across the globe by political upheavals, has become another vehicle for cultural transmission. In Los Angeles, London, Toronto, and Sydney, Persian communities maintain their traditions while adapting to new contexts. Persian restaurants introduce new audiences to the subtleties of saffron and sumac. Persian cultural centers teach classical music and poetry to new generations. the ancient culture proves its vitality by successfully transplanting to new soil. Remember that the legacy of Persia is not merely historical, but living. Every time someone reads a verse of Rumi seeking wisdom, every time a mathematician uses an algorithm, every time a doctor considers the psychological dimensions of illness, every time a gardener creates a paradise on earth, every time beauty is chosen over mere utility, in all these moments the spirit of Persia lives on. The same stars that witnessed Cyrus proclaiming religious freedom, that saw Darius building his great road, that watched Persian poets composing verses of immortal beauty, shine upon us still. We are all inheritors of Persian civilization's gifts, its tolerance and diversity, its integration of spiritual and material, its insistence that life should be not merely lived but beautified, its faith that wisdom and culture can triumph over force and ignorance. Rest now in the assurance that great civilizations never truly die. They transform, evolve, and continue to influence in ways both obvious and subtle. The empire of Cyrus and Darius may have passed into history, but the vision they embodied of a world where different peoples and cultures can coexist in mutual respect, where beauty and wisdom are valued alongside power, where the human spirit seeks always to transcend its limitations, this vision remains as relevant today as it was 25 centuries ago. In your dreams tonight, perhaps you will walk in a moonlit Persian garden where nightingales sing to roses, or stand before the ruins of Persepolis, where stone recalls ancient glory, or sit in a bazaar where merchants have traded for 1,000 years, or listen to a poet whose words dissolve the boundaries between self and beloved, earth and heaven, human and divine. These are not merely dreams, but connections to an eternal heritage, reminders that we are all part of a human story larger than any single civilization, yet enriched immeasurably by each culture's unique gifts. Sleep peacefully now, carried by the rhythms of history into restorative rest, knowing that tomorrow you will wake refreshed, perhaps seeing the world with new eyes, eyes that can perceive the Persian beauty hidden in everyday life, the ancient wisdom speaking through modern forms, the eternal flame of human creativity that no conquest can extinguish, no time erode. The story of Persia, like all great stories, has no true ending, only transformation into new chapters yet to be written. Sweet dreams, and may your sleep be as peaceful as a Persian garden at dawn, as deep as the wisdom of ancient sages, and as refreshing as the mountain streams that have nourished this eternal civilization since the beginning of remembered time.